Everybody, peace. Welcome to the STBY show. Wherever or however you're listening, we are so grateful to have you here with us. As you guys know, I'm your host, Casuan. And since it's Thursday, guys, we are not going to be doing a college football, NFL, or basketball show. We're going to be doing an edition of we call it self-improvement show, but really these types of shows and episodes is what the Started Broadway show is what we base our foundation off of. Which is the improvement of oneself and the self-analyzation and the critical thinking aspect of how to improve one's well-being, right? And not to sound, you know, not to wax poetic or sound like facetious or, you know, like we're on like a high-end mindset, but it's just general guidelines and concepts that have helped us from our experiences and just finding ways to get that knowledge back to our community. So today I want to talk about the importance of one's self-worth and how to truly value your self-worth and where particularly you're putting your self-worth at and whether that's the right space to be putting your self-worth. And, you know, as a professional basketball player, I'm going to use a story during my experience, my current experience as a professional basketball player, to provide context. And I'm also going to use movies, a couple of movies, to provide a little bit of clarity and context as well as a backdrop for this topic. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it, guys. So, like I said, the concept of self-worth, man, it's something that's been talked about quite frequently in today's society, the importance of it and why it's necessary to have. And I agree, it's important to have self-worth. It's important to know who you are as an individual and what you're willing to tolerate and what your values are. And it's important because it helps establish boundaries and it helps to provide a framework for how you want to move about in society. It helps provide a framework for what you feel like your purpose is or what you feel like your goals should be moving forward. And I want to use a story from my rookie season playing professional basketball. And I'll never forget when it took me 5 months to receive my first contract as a professional basketball player. So that's 5 months of working out 3 times a day, waiting to hear back from teams, from my agent, basically unemployed, and just waiting and working out and anxiously waiting for that call saying, okay, here's your deal. Here's the deal. We're going to sign you with this team. And I waited and I waited, and I was I had put my self-worth into the title of me being a professional basketball player. And I had, I thought I had self-worth. I valued my self-worth. I tied my self-worth into the concept of being a professional basketball player. And I'll never forget when I was grateful when I first got the news that the team in England wanted to sign me. And I was elated and I was joyous. I was grateful. And then I'll never forget when I was signing the actual contract, the feeling of almost emptiness. It felt empty. It felt like, okay, well, those 5 months went by and I got this, so what's next? And it felt like almost when you relapse off an addiction, like it just, okay, what's next? I want the next fix. And that's when I first realized, okay, something is off about this way I'm moving about in life as a professional basketball player. And so, I tied my self-worth to being called a professional basketball player. And when I signed my first deal, I was like, okay, nice. This is it for me. This is how I value myself. But something just felt empty. And then I go through my first season and I go to my second season. And it took me 7 months to get my second contract as a professional basketball player. And this time it was in Armenia. And the same feeling I had, like, during 7 months, I was in a very low space emotionally and mentally, because it felt like I had lost my self-worth because I no longer had the title of professional basketball player. But then when I get my deal, and I get a sense of elation and then an emptiness. And so then I'm kind of like riding the false sense of self-worth by being under contract, by having a contract for the season. And then I go into my third season in Mexico, and this is where success starts to come with the self, quote unquote, we think success comes with the self-worth. So once again, I thought I had a lot of self-worth because I had tied it to my career as a professional basketball player. So I'm in Mexico now, and we make it to the playoffs. And this is the first time I had made the playoffs during my career as a professional basketball player. So now I had success. But something in the back of my mind, there's a soft, quiet voice that was telling me, this can't be all there is. There's got to be more to it. And so I started to lose a sense of joy in actually playing basketball while under contract. And then coupled that with the fact, okay, when the season ends, I feel empty. I feel like I have no value because I'm technically not a professional basketball player if I'm not under contract. So now it seemed like I'm no longer finding joy in basketball as well as when I'm, no longer under contract. And that's when I started to feel lost. Okay, where is my self-worth at? What am I truly valuing in life? What is my quote unquote purpose? And it was strange to me because all my life I wanted this thing. I wanted to be a professional basketball player. And when you reach that point, you realize that there's so much more to the world. You realize that there's so much more than just being a professional basketball player. There's so much more than just being a musician, than just being a financial exec, than just being a police officer. Like, we have these goals, we have these titles that we want, but when we achieve them, we realize there's so much more to this world. There's so much more to life. And for me, I had tied my self-worth, my entire self-worth to one desired reward, one desired outcome of being a professional basketball player. And when I achieved it, I realized this isn't going to bring me true value. This isn't where my self-worth should be at. And once I realized that, it forced me to change my perspective. And I realized that if I want to get the most out of life, I can't continue to have this mindset. So after my third season, like I said, made the playoffs in Mexico. Even with the success, I still was empty. And that's when I realized I needed to change my perspective. I needed to shift my focus. And all throughout my life, I shifted I had my focus and my self-worth tied to, like I said, professional basketball player. But that title stays the same. What's changing? What is something that I can kind of control? Because at the end of the day, I can't control when the next contract comes. I can't control when a team wants to give me a new deal, right? Now, I've been blessed to have 2 more deals after that, so I'm currently, about to go into my 5th year. But I can't control when a team wants to sign me or, cut me. But I can control my approach, my process going to that deal, or, working out and staying consistent and being patient. I can control those things. And I realized that that's where you truly evolve. You evolve with your growth, right? That's the growth phase. That's the growth moment right there, is when you move forward in we call it the evolution, the process, the journey. You can control that because those are the steps you're actually taking. We have very little control over the desired, quote unquote, desired outcome that we want. And that's really in the Most High's hand. But we can control the journey, the steps we take to get there. And so I realized that I can't tie my self-worth to anything that's in the physical world, because anything in this physical realm is temporary. But I can tie my self-worth to the process, to the growth of myself as an individual. And so that's when I started to truly shift my perspective and my focus from not tying my self-worth to anything in this physical realm, which will be like a job title, because that can leave at any moment and I can't control that. But I can tie my self-worth to my growth, because that's spiritual, that's emotional, that's mental, that's not tangible, right? So I need to tie my self-worth to that, because that's going to constantly always grow and evolve. And that's when I truly started to get a shift in perspective and focus, and I started to get a better realization of how life, from my perspective, should be moving, of how I should be moving about this life. And we see that in films such as the Dark Knight trilogy with Christopher Nolan, particularly in The Dark Knight Rises. We see Bruce Wayne has tied his complete life and tied everything he has to the title of being the Batman, being the Dark Knight. And he thinks that if he loses that mantle, he loses himself. And Alfred tells him that he has always imagined a life for Bruce outside of Gotham, outside of being the Dark Knight. But Bruce can't see past that, because he has tied everything, his self-worth, his value, his purpose, quote unquote, to being the Dark Knight. And it's not until Bruce loses the mantle of the Dark Knight, it's not until Bruce is in the pit, until he lost everything, that he truly understands what his purpose is, or what his self-worth should be tied to. And that is his growth, his development as a man. And that's when you see the most development out of Bruce throughout all the films, even from when he's training with the League of Shadows to in the Dark Knight. You see the most growth and development out of Bruce when he's in the pit, when he's in the Lazarus pit, because he has lost everything. He's lost everything. He's lost what he's tied his self-worth to. That was the Batman. He lost that, and then he truly gained perspective. And there's a quote in The Dark Knight Rises when after Bruce climbs out of the pit and he gets the mantle back of Batman, and he travels back to Gotham, and he's fighting Bane, and Bane says, "I broke you." And when you listen to that quote, listen, every growth, everything that's new comes from some sort of destruction. There has to be some sort of destruction in order for there to be a rejuvenation and growth process. And so Bane says, "I broke you," and Bruce Wayne doesn't necessarily respond, but with that lack of response, it's implied to the audience that Bane broke the Batman, but in doing so, he developed Bruce Wayne. He grew. He allowed Bruce Wayne to grow into a new individual. And so now Bruce Wayne no longer ties his self-worth to the Batman, our title, but rather to his growth as an individual, as a man. And that's when he truly starts to become what he set out to be, a symbol, a beacon of hope. And the same thing applies to us, that we don't truly start to have purpose, or we don't truly start to, have a positive impact on people until we no longer put our self-worth, tie our self-worth to like physical titles, tangible titles. Once we no longer see ourselves as professional basketball players or professional football players or CEOs or CFOs, but instead see ourselves as individuals who have a story to tell based on the growth they experience, then that's when people start to be inspired by us. And you see the same thing in movies like Shawshank Redemption, where Andy Dufresne has lost his freedom, his job, his job as an accountant. He's lost his freedom, he's lost everything, but he hasn't lost his hope. He hasn't lost his self-worth. And so he tied his self-worth to his growth. He realized that even though he's in prison, he can still grow as an individual. And so that's where Andy Dufresne finds his self-worth. And that's why he had the wherewithal to escape out of prison and not give into that mental frame, that mindset, what makes people become institutionalized while they're in prison. He put his self-worth in his growth process, which is why he never became institutionalized. And we see it as well in a movie such as Soul, where Joe Gardner is looking for his purpose, or I feel like he's finally found his purpose. And we're going to talk about purpose in a separate episode or a separate show. But he's tied his self-worth to what he thinks is his purpose, as opposed to the process it took to get to where he is. Because if he had tied his self-worth to his development and his growth process, he would understand that he's had a positive impact on people by teaching music. And I'm gonna save this because we're gonna talk about that film in a separate show, like I said. But he tied his purpose, or his self-worth, to what he thought was his purpose, which was playing music. But really his purpose was teaching, and his self-worth could be found through that growth experience of teaching people. And if he would have done that, then he would see the positive impact, the beautiful impact he's had on people over the course of his life through teaching music. And the same thing, that same concept can be applied to ourselves. If we can shift our self-worth to our growth process, to our developmental process, as opposed to the desired outcome or reward, then we can start to see the impact we have on people and the impact we can truly have on society. And I understand it's easier said than done, but once we can take the necessary steps to not put extra pressure on ourselves and not put pressure on the desired reward or outcome, and not put our self-worth in that space, but instead put our self-worth in the growth, the steps that it takes to get there, then we start to be more genuine and more sincere, and we start to get more out of this life. So oftentimes once we get to that stage of the desired reward or outcome, we feel empty because we've spent so much time getting to this place or getting to this desired outcome. And when we get there, when we get it, it's like, damn, well, what's next? Is this all there is to it? And that's the same thing I experienced. I worked my whole life to become a professional basketball player. And when I got there, I was like, oh, wow, is this it? What's next? And what happens is the wool starts to get pulled back from over your eyes, and you realize that there's so much more to life than just job titles and these physical things, secular things that we have or that we desire. And don't get it misconstrued. It's good to have goals to some extent, right? But as long as we're not putting pressure on ourselves to hit the goals, but having a roadmap to follow, yes, it's perfect. But don't don't attach our self-worth to something in this physical world, something we can't control, which is really the outcome. But we can control the steps we take to get there. We can control the process we go through. Because at the end of the day, no matter what the goal is, whether we achieve it or we don't achieve it, we experience growth. And that's true, and that's winning at the end of the day. Either way, we experience growth, and that's all we can do as human beings, is experience growth one day at a time. And that's where our self-worth should be placed in, the growth we experience every day. But that's my perspective on it, guys. I just wanted to share this a little bit of this story with you guys because I thought it was necessary, especially as a young black man. It's something that I've noticed today, especially with other black men, that we tie our self-worth to these to these job titles and these physical things, and we start to become lost in that process or in that. But if we can maintain our, like I said, the right mindset, I think it can help us. But once again, it's just my perspective, how I see it. But don't tie your self-worth to a desired goal or outcome. Tie your self-worth to your growth as an individual, to the process it takes to get there. But that is it. That's it for our show for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay up to date on all our latest content. We'll be back again, guys, tomorrow with another episode or with another show, same time, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, continue to stay safe, be vigilant, make smart decisions, and peace.